Good morning, everyone. This is Julie McDonald with Microcom Technologies, and I'd like to thank all of you for attending today's webinar with Cambium Networks. Today's host is John Mead, and he is their Senior Director of Engineering and Product Development and will be presenting today. If anyone has any questions, please submit them in the question box, and John will answer them at the end of today's presentation. Thank you, John, so much for being with us today. We appreciate your time. Looking forward to the information you're going to be sharing with us. I am finished for now. Please go ahead and take it on over.
Thank you very much, Julie. I appreciate it. Hi, everybody. This is John. You may have heard me speak before, but I'm John Mead. I've been with Cambium Networks for just over 4 years now. It's gone by so fast, but came on board to start the Ethernet portfolio for us, the Ethernet switching portfolio. We started shipping products about 3 years ago. And anyway, I want to give you guys an update where we're at and kind of focus on a key differentiating capabilities that we have with our Ethernet switching portfolio. Okay, let's get started. So today, I'm going to give you a quick overview on the portfolio, focus a little bit on what's new. So earlier this year, we started shipping our TX2K switches as opposed to our EX switches. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on a feature that we call policy-based automation. We refer to it as PBA, but PBA really contributes to our overall objective of making these switches very easy to use. So getting going here, before I really dive into the details, I want to make it clear that, we're just not about selling switches or just about selling Wi-Fi. It's really about selling the overall solution. So we have our switches that I'm going to talk to you about today that give you the wired connectivity. We have all of our Wi-Fi devices and as well as our fixed wireless radios for the wireless connectivity. And then what really pulls it all together is our management platform, or either CN Maestro or XMS, cloud-based management. And that really brings it all together. So these three elements, the switches, the Wi-Fi radios, and the management, really gives us a very complete and comprehensive solution for our customers' deployments and our customers' networks. Now, getting back to switching a little bit, there's three key points that I'm going to talk about today and that I really want to leave you with, which is ease of use, zero touch simplicity, and that's using our feature policy-based automation, which I will dig into later. Security, long list of security features, and we have a little bit of automated security as well, and that's also kind of leveraging our policy-based automation, but we do auto segmentation and automatic device profiling and enforcement of those policies as you connect devices to the network. And you're tying it all together, all the features that I talked about today, for the most part, come with the base price of the switch. So the features, the switch itself, the limited lifetime warranty of 5 years, and Cambium support all comes with the one price. We don't have any hidden subscription fees or licensing fees. All right. So CN Matrix switching, our Ethernet portfolio at Cambium. So we have two families of switches. And these are purpose-built for these deployment use cases. We didn't really want to build one switch for both. We would have to have made too many compromises. But on the left there, you see our EX family of switches. These are our enterprise switches. These are access switches. And on the right, you see our family of TX switches, and these are meant for our fixed wireless broadband application, our WISP tower type of deployments. So for both of these families of switches, we use the same architecture, the same switching architecture, and we use the same code base. Not only do we use the same code base, it's actually the same executable binary image that you would load onto either an EX switch or a TX switch. And that has lots of benefits. But, when we started developing these switches, software and the hardware, 4+ years ago, we had a few key objectives in mind. I'm going to list those for you now. So it's kind of boring to talk about this with the customer, but this really was a main objective of ours from the very beginning, and that's to develop a very high quality and robust switch. And that's true from both a hardware point of view and a software point of view. Our next initiative, and very high priority, and I just want to point out, these switches are enterprise grade, non-blocking L2 and L3 switching. So you can switch your traffic using L2, or you can switch your traffic using L3. We do support dynamic routing, and we do that at line rate. So the internal architecture of these switches will not block any traffic. Operational efficiency or ease of use. This is the big one. This is where we spend a lot of time, and we will never be finished with this. In every release, we constantly are adding features and capabilities to make it easier to use the switches, easier to deploy the switches, easier to manage, easier to configure, and easier to troubleshoot as well. So this is a big one for us. And the feature PBA that I'm going to talk about goes a long way into supporting this initiative. Okay, security. So security is a hot topic out there. It has been for 20 years or more, and we do put a lot of effort into security on these switches. Long list of features, but also features like our policy-based automation can automate security for you and prevent any errors caused by human misconfiguration. Our management story is very, very nice. I talked about it a little bit already, but our cloud, our network management solution is cloud-based or on-premise based, and you can manage all your Cambium products with this one pane of glass. So not just your switches, not just your Wi-Fi access points, not just your fixed wireless broadband radios, everything with either cnMaestro or XMS. So it's a very nice solution that pulls it all together. Not too many vendors can claim that. Best in class total cost of ownership. I truly believe this. If you look at just one thing, that's you might find higher or lower prices, but when you look at the overall solution, the limited lifetime warranty, we do not charge extra for that. Some of these extra features that I'm going to talk about today, we do not charge extra for that. The management, cnMaestro comes with an essentials version, which can do practically everything I'm talking about today, and that comes for free as well. So very, very competitive total cost of ownership. Okay, double clicking a little bit, going a little bit deeper. So our enterprise indoor switches. So we have 12 switches today that we're shipping. And again, these are all enterprise grade L2, L3 non-blocking switches. Now, in these enterprise switches, we have two series of switches. We have the EX2K and the EX1K. The EX2K is really targeted at that sweet spot in the enterprise space, the mid segment. The EX1K, a few less features at a more competitive price. Now, with these 12 models, we support all the different port configurations that you normally hear about. We have 8-port switches, 24-port switches, 48-port switches, and for all of those, we have PoE versions and we have non-PoE versions. In addition to that, we also have a multi-gig switch, which supports more than 1 gig per port. These ports will support up to 2.5 gig. And what's interesting on these ports, and this is big, we also support 802.3 BT, which is the new PoE standard. And anyway, we implement our ports with 4-pair PoE, so that enables us to support up to 60 watts. Other vendors have this also, but it's rare. 99% of all the switches out there today are 30 watts per port. That's 802.3 .AT. Now these switches, we have fiber uplinks on all these switches. Almost all of our switches have 10 gig fiber uplinks, SFP plus. Our 8-port switches have 1 gig fiber uplinks or SFP ports. We have your standard RJ45 console port. We have a USB port on our switch, which is used for transferring files to and from the switch. It's also very useful, I'm told, for charging your cell phone when you're in the wiring closet. We also have a true out-of-band network management port. So if you use this port and your network goes down, you still have access to the switch. You can still manage your switch through this out-of-band network management port. Okay, so that is our EX switches. We've been shipping these for 3+ years now, going strong, doing very well, actually. Our WISP tower switches, this is what's new. We started shipping these earlier this year, and I'm going to talk about them a little bit more in a few slides, but I'll just go real quick here. We have 3 different switches in this family, an 8-port, 16-port, and 24-port. Those are the number of access ports we have. In addition to that, we also have 4 10 gig SFP plus fiber ports. Now these switches use they use removable power supplies. On one of the switches, we have 2 slots, so you can have redundant power supplies if you desire. Now these switches include everything that you would need for your WISP or tower deployment. We provide Cambium sync on all of the ports, so if you want to connect any of the Cambium radios that require the sync signal. We also support all the different non-standard PoE modes. On our enterprise switches that I was talking about a few minutes ago, we support standards-based PoE. On these tower switches, we also support standards-based PoE. We believe very strongly in standards-based PoE, but we also support the passive PoE modes that are required by some of the radios at Cambium, some of the radios from third-party vendors. To power those up, we need to support this passive PoE mode. So low voltage passive PoE or the high voltage 54 volt passive PoE, we support both. And we support up to 90 watts of power on some of the ports. And that's needed for some of these really high-end radios. Like at Cambium, we have the 450M or the Medusa radio, and that requires 90 watts. So powering up those radios, no problem at all. Okay, moving on here. So these tower switches that I was just talking about, this is kind of a high-level introduction. What is it? It's a new family of switches, and they absolutely are purpose-built for these WISP tower deployments. What's key about these switches, and I reviewed this a minute ago, and it's worth repeating. What's key is that these switches include all the functionality you need to deploy your towers. You can deploy towers with other vendors' products, but you can't do it with just one box. You need at least a couple other boxes. So this switch has all 3 key components that you need. First of all, it's a switch. It's an enterprise-grade, non-blocking L2, L3 switch. It has all the various PoE flavors that you would need for any type of device out there. It's very rare that you find a device that cannot be powered up via PoE from our switches. And then third, Cambium sync, which you might have to buy separate modules for. Not with this switch. Cambium sync is provided by this switch as well. So with other vendors' products, you might have a mid-span device combined with a switch. So in that example, you need at least 2 boxes. Here, you can do it with 1. Okay, what else about these switches? Well, EX switches and TX switches, it's the same, fully manageable. We support COI, we support a web GUI. We have all of our features are instrumented with an SNMP MIB. So you can use your favorite SNMP app if you want. And the icing on the cake, the management interface that we promote is our cloud-based management CN Maestro that kind of ties it all together. We do have removable power supplies on these switches. And I mentioned before, one of the switches, I'll show you it in a minute, it has 2 slots. Fully functional with just 1 power supply, but if you use 2, then you have redundancy built in. Extended temperature range from -10 degrees C up to 65 degrees C. They're not waterproof. You can't put them out in the rain and snow. When I show you the pictures, that will be obvious, but they are hardened from a temperature point of view and hardened from a surge protection point of view. I mentioned this already, but it is important. These switches are new, right? We've been shipping them about 9 months now. The software is not new. The software has been shipping for 3+ years on our EX switches. So The software is hardened. It just has some extra features that we use on these WISP switches. And these WISP switches, 3-year lifetime, limited lifetime warranty on these switches. Okay, just real quick, here are the 3 switches that I've been talking about. Now the switch on the upper left, it's kind of a good picture to show you. You can see that there's 2 power supplies plugged in. Now these are AC power supplies. You could use DC if you'd like. But anyway, these are 2 AC power supplies. The switch is fully functional with just one, but the second one there is for redundancy purposes. And that's turning out to be a very popular, very common request. Now, how do we compare these 3 switches? They're exactly equal in functionality. It's just the port configuration that's different. You either have 8 ports of copper or 16 ports of copper, or on the 3rd switch, the bottom right, you have 16 ports of copper and 8 ports of 1 gig fiber. And then for all 3 switches on top of that, we also have 4 10 gig fiber ports as well. And then the only other difference between these 3 switches, other than the port configuration, is that the TX 2020 has the dual power supplies. Okay, PBA. What is PBA? So why am I making a big deal out of it? Well, so here we are, we're shipping Ethernet switching portfolio, and the world does not need another vendor for Ethernet switches. There's a dozen vendors out there that provide good switches. So why are we entering this Ethernet switching market? Well, we're entering it not really to have the best Ethernet switch out there and to compete with Cisco. We're offering our switches to give a more comprehensive and complete solution with our other products. So at the edge of your network, you can get the wired switches from us, you can get the wireless devices from us, and you can get the management from us. So it's one comprehensive solution, all from one vendor. Now, when we enter this space, when we enter this market, it's such a mature market, it's hard to differentiate yourself, right? When we talk about L2 switching, all the layer 2 features, it's a well-known list, right? If you look at the feature list from Cisco, you look at the feature list from HP, and you look at the feature list from us, they're all going to be the same. We're all kind of equal in that respect. However, we did provide this feature called PBA, and this is unique. You will not find this feature on other vendors' switches. And what does this do for you? Well, it provides automation for you, and it delivers to you a true zero-touch experience, and I'm going to talk about that. So to get started, let me talk about this term zero-touch. Zero-touch is a term that everyone uses. You ask 10 people, you're going to get 10 different answers as to what it really means. So let me tell you what I think it means. So zero-touch means the configuration that you need to do on the switch, that configuration is somehow automated, so you don't have to do it. It's zero-touch. So an example of that is when you are first deploying your switch, when you first take it out of the box and you plug it in, there is some type of a base configuration that you want on that switch. There's some items that you want to change, and I have some examples here. Static VLANs, uplink ports, link aggregation. Now what people do is, let's say they're going to deploy 100 switches across their different buildings or different sites or whatever. Well, what they'll do is they'll buy all these 100 switches and they'll pre-stage them somewhere and then send them out to the different sites. There's no need to do that if you can automate this, and we do automate this. We automate this using our cloud-based management, CN Maestro. So what happens is you create this configuration once in your cloud account, in your CN Maestro account, and then when you connect your switches into the network, the switches will reach out and find the CN Maestro management platform, and they'll go through an onboarding and registration process. And during that process, that initial config is automatically downloaded. So you just take the box, the switch fresh out of the cardboard box, you plug it in, and it's automatically going to be onboarded, registered with CN Maestro, and it's going to get its initial config. So this is kind of what people think of when they think of zero touch. How do you automate that initial configuration? So for me, that's kind of only half the story. The second half of the story, and the more interesting half, is the configuration required for ongoing network changes, right? Your day-to-day operation of the network. And some examples of that are, from day to day, you're adding new devices, or you're removing devices, or you're moving devices from one port of one switch to one port of another switch. So some examples I've listed here: connecting access points, connecting cameras, connecting printers, connecting IoT devices. For each of those devices, there is going to be some amount of configuration that you're going to want to do on the switch. It might be very little, or it might be a lot. But some examples are, you want to put that device on the correct VLAN. It's the most popular thing to do. You want to set the QoS settings, quality of service settings. You want to set the security settings. You want to enable a feature that we have on that port, or you want to automatically label that port, that type of thing. So connecting in devices, you want to somehow automate the configuration that's required. But what about when you remove a device? That's equally important, or maybe more important. When you remove a device, you want to clean up that configuration for a couple reasons. One reason is you want to keep your config file as clean as possible. We all know how messy and how overgrown config files can become. And the second reason for cleaning up your configuration is from a security point of view, right? You don't want to leave VLANs dangling on a port. So, VLANs open on a port for, you plug in another device, that device will, automatically get access to those VLANs. So cleaning up the configuration is very important from a security point of view as well. So this configuration that you have to do on the switch, how do you automate that? That's the trick here. If you can automate that, well, then it truly is a zero-touch environment. And that's what policy-based automation does. This is how we have implemented the automation of this day-to-day configuration that you may need to do. So let me dig into this a little bit deeper. So from a security point of view, what do? Well, the switch, we will closely monitor every time a new device is plugged into the switch, and we will gather as much information as we can get on that device. And this is what we call device profiling. Now, does that profile match a policy that you have created, right? So you can create these policies. And every time you connect in a new device, we automatically profile that device and see if it matches one of these policies. And we will automatically enforce that policy if it does match. So, and that policy is what does the configuration I was talking about: sets up the VLAN, sets up the QoS settings, sets up the security settings, so on and so forth. And then from a security point of view, what I just mentioned, right? When you remove that device, we automatically clean up that configuration, so it's not left over, so it's not open to some other device that gets plugged in next. So very, very secure. Now, moving on to simplicity. This is really what PBA is all about. This is zero touch for the initial deployment, but it's also zero touch as you add devices or move devices in your network. So for this reason, we can treat all ports on your switches, so all ports of all switches, we can treat them equal. So you can plug that next device that you want to connect. Let's say it's a video surveillance camera. You can plug it into any port of any switch, and PBA will automatically detect it and automatically apply the policy, which means it will automatically configure that switch. But more importantly, it configures that specific port that the device was detected on. So total cost of ownership, right? So what PBA really does for you is it eliminates the error-prone and time-consuming manual configuration. I don't know if I believe the stat or not, but they say 80% of network problems are due to some type of misconfiguration, which is usually caused by human errors. But anyway, you would eliminate all that fat fingering, or the potential of fat fingering, by automating this process. So when you want to deploy these cameras or radios or any type of IoT device, you don't really need any specially skilled or trained IT resources for this. I'm not saying you don't need IT. IT is a very valuable team. They're very, very busy though, so this is just one less thing for them to do. So little or no IT is required for these ads, moves, and changes. Overall, out of everything I've just said, it significantly reduces time, energy, and the costs required for managing and maintaining your network. A quick summary of everything I just said. Number one, it automates the configuration necessary for adds, moves, and changes of network devices. It eliminates the error-prone and manual configuration. Every port is treated equally, right? Plug that device into any port you want, it really doesn't matter. Enhances security by auto-segmenting the devices into the VLAN specified in the policy, and overall just reduces the expenses required to deploy and manage your network. All right, I'm going to give you a few examples as a wrap up. I love to give live demos, and I have like one switch and one or two devices that I plug in, and I can show how the configuration on the switch is empty. And then when I plug in a device, all of a sudden the configuration is, voila, there's all this configuration on the switch. And then when I remove that device, all of a sudden the configuration disappears. So it's a fun demo to give. And if anyone's interested in seeing that demo, please reach out to Julie and we can schedule something. But let me run through a few examples. So I said a second ago that my demos are, one switch, one device. But in a real world, it's not one switch. In this example here, let's say you have 20 switches and 300 devices that you want to connect, right? 200 video surveillance cameras and 100 access points. So how would you use PBA for this? Well, you need to create two policies, one for the access points and one for the cameras. And after you do this, you're finished. There's nothing else for you to do other than to physically plug in those devices. And remember, you can plug them into any port of any switch. So once you plug them in, the VLANs get created automatically, and that port that the device was plugged into, that port will automatically become a member of those VLANs. Whatever QoS and security settings you have associated with those devices through the policy will also automatically be applied as well. So, you create these two policies on C and Maestro at the beginning of time, and sometime later, a day later, a week later, a month later, you plug in these devices. But that's all you do. You just physically plug them in and you're finished. So it's 100% zero touch. Another example, kind of an amusing example, but it is very real. This absolutely happens. So let's say you have some type of accidental disconnection. You trip on a cable, or you're reaching under a desk and you disconnect one of the ports of the Ethernet switch. And so what you do is you plug that device back in, right? You look over your shoulder, you make sure no one's looking, and you quickly plug it back in. Well, let's say you plug it into the wrong port. You plug it into port 4 when it was supposed to be plugged into port 3. So without PBA, that's going to cause problems. So this device, let's say it's a Wi-Fi access point. If you plug that into the wrong port, the Wi-Fi access point is still going to receive PoE from that port. PoE is enabled typically on all ports. So when that Wi-Fi access point powers up, it's going to advertise its SSIDs, and wireless devices will connect to that access point. But the traffic won't flow through the switch because it was plugged into the wrong port, and that port is not configured with the right VLANs. So without PBA, you're kind of stuck, and you get a bunch of trouble tickets called into the IT team. However, with PBA, that does not happen. When you unplug it, and when it gets unplugged from one port, the configuration on that port automatically gets cleaned up. That's step one. And then when you plug it back into a different port, PBA automatically detects it and automatically applies the correct configuration to that port. So with PBA, when you plug it back into the wrong port, you still get connectivity and no problems at all. So anyway, so that's a real life example. I was involved with deploying network at the Sochi Olympics way back when, and we had this problem, right? The guy plugged the AP into the wrong port. Port 11, I even remember the ports, port 11, and port 10 though was the one that was hard-coded and configured for that access point. So it's simply just plugging into the wrong port did cause problems. PBA would have caught that. Okay, one more example for you. I call this the super secure example, but this is where you create a single default policy. And this default policy is designed to match any device you could possibly ever plug in to that into that switch or into your group of switches. And so every device matches this policy. So every device will get this default setting. You know, the QoS, the quality of the service, can be set low, and the VLAN for that device can be set to the quote unquote guest VLAN. And this policy has a low precedence. So now this two is to create more policies for the devices that you do know about, the devices that you do care about. So video surveillance cameras, you can create a policy for that, or your Wi-Fi access points, you can create a policy for that. And those policies, they won't use the guest VLAN. They'll use the, you know, whatever VLANs you want to use for your video surveillance traffic, if you use a different VLAN for that. Same thing for the Wi-Fi access points. Now, these policies, the precedence value is a little bit higher. That means this policy will take precedence over the default policy. But anyway, if you use this configuration, then only the known devices that you create policies for will get on to the secure networks that you care about and worry about. Everything else can be either not allowed on the network at all, or it can be put into some type of guest, quote unquote, guest VLAN. So that's a pretty cool feature that people are really gravitating towards. That kind of wraps up for my overview today. Julie, I think I'm a few minutes late, but why don't we try to take some Q&A if there are some.
Thank you very much, John. No, we are good on time. Don't worry about that. And thank you for that wonderful presentation. And I do have some questions for you. Let's go ahead and get started with the first one. This is regarding the XMS Maestro. Can you tell us about the cost? Did you mention that?
Yeah, thank you. So we have two management platforms. One is called CN Maestro, and CN Maestro has a couple different versions. There's a version called CN Maestro Essentials. And what that means is it gives you all the essential functionality and capability that you want and need. For example, every feature I mentioned today is covered by CN Maestro Essentials. Now, what is the cost for CN Maestro Essential? It's zero. If you buy the base price of the, if you buy the switch, the base cost of the switch is what you pay. You don't pay anything else. No licensing, no subscription. You do get CN Maestro Essentials, and you do get the limited lifetime warranty I'm talking about. You do get all the features I'm talking about. Now, let me give you an example of when you might want the paid version of CN Maestro. So we have another version of CN Maestro called CN Maestro X. So CN Maestro Essential, I'm trying to think of some examples here, but CN Maestro Essentials will give you stats, various statistics on packets and so on and so forth. And it will give you a historical stats. It's really kind of cool. And it will give you stats up to 7 days. But with the CN Maestro X paid version, you get more than 7 days worth of history. So that's an example of when you want to step up to the next level of CN Maestro. Now, there are some features for the Wi-Fi products that you get with CN Maestro X, but you don't get with CN Maestro Essential. For the switches, there are also some examples of some features you get with CN Maestro X, but not with CN Maestro Essentials. We haven't enabled that yet. On the switches, you get everything, and it's in the documentation which features you will not get when we transition to this paid model. But all the features I've told you about today, you do get. I'm trying to think of an example. So we have a feature called ADR, Auto Device Recovery. What that does is when a device appears to go offline or to stop being responsive, we have a feature that you can enable. It's off by default, but if you enable that feature, it will automatically toggle PoE for that device. So that means it will automatically give that device a power cycle. And when it powers back up, hopefully it will fix the problem and correct the problem. Anyway, that ADR feature is a feature that's on the list that will not come with CN Maestro Essentials, but you do get it with CN Maestro X.
Thank you so much for that, John. Next question here for you. How many locations can be monitored on one CN Maestro account?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I apologize. It's a big number. It's like 10,000 or something like that on your CN Maestro account. And your CN Maestro account can be used to manage multiple customers, right? You can have multiple, it's set up to do, manage multiple customers. So it's not 10,000, it has to be for just one customer. It can be, that 10,000 can be used across different customers that you may have.
Excellent. Thank you so much, John. Next question here. What are the warranties on the EX switches, and will it work with third-party network devices?
Yeah, so we are a big believer in standards-based technology. So especially from an Ethernet connectivity point of view, you can connect this Ethernet switch to any other Ethernet switch that's out there. And because it's such a mature technology, there's going to be very few, if any, surprises. Yeah, so from an interconnectivity point of view, from an interoperability point of view, no problem at all. And the other question was about the warranty. The limited lifetime warranty that comes with the purchase of the device is 5 years on the EX switches. The limited lifetime warranty that comes with the TX switches is 3 years.
Thank you very much for that, John. Next question here for you. What is the largest tower switch available?
So we have a tower switch right now, and we call it WISP/tower switches. These switches are designed to go at the base of the tower in some type of enclosure. It could be a hut or a shack, or it could be just a simple enclosure box, right? But anyway, we have an 8-port, 16-port, and a 24-port switch. In addition to that, we have 4 fiber uplink ports. So it's actually a 12-port, a 20-port, and a 28-port switch. So what is the biggest one? It's the switch with 28 ports, and that the port configuration is 16 RJ45 1 gig copper ports, 8 1 gig SFP fiber ports, and 4 10 gig SFP plus fiber ports.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Next question here for you. Are your switches rack mountable, and do the switches come in the package?
Yeah, good question. Thanks. The majority of our switches are rack width, so they will mount into a rack, and it comes with rack mount ears in the switch. But some of our switches are not a full width. So for example, our 8-port switch is approximately, in fact, it's the EX 8-port switch is a half of a rack width. And that switch does not come with rack mounting ears. It is available as an accessory though. And the way the rack mounting kit, it's one short ear. So when you mount it in rack, it's all the way to one side of the rack, and then one long rack ear that will connect it to the other side of the rack. And the reason why we did not include that with the switch, this is kind of a controversial issue. The people that want it wish it was included. The people that don't want it don't care. So a lot of people use these 8-port switches in non-racking applications. So we didn't want to burden everybody with the cost of these rack mount ears. So anyway, it is available. It's low price. It's available as an accessory.
Thank you, John. Next question here for you. Are all Cambium switches PoE?
We have both. So yeah, every switch we have, it comes in a PoE flavor for sure, where we support PoE on all ports. But we also have the same switches that do not support PoE at all. So let's use our 8-port switch as an example. So we have the EX 2010 switch, and we have the 2010, and then we have the 2010-P. The -P, all 8 ports support PoE, and the 2010 without the -P, there is no PoE in those ports. The non-PoE switches are not common at all. We don't sell very many of them, but there are some deployments where they need non-PoE switches, and it's a lower price. It's a lower cost. You don't need the larger power supply, and then you also don't need the circuitry required for PoE.
Thank you, John. Just two more questions here. Next one, regarding CN Maestro automation, will this work remotely?
Yes, absolutely. So these policies that I'm talking about, the PBA engine is implemented and executes on the actual switch. When you create a policy, you can create a policy using our COI interface. You can create it using our web GUI interface. You can create it using SNMP MIB objects, or you can create it with one of our cloud-based management platforms, either XMS or CN Maestro. Now, if you create it on CN Maestro as an example, that's really the right way or the best way to do it, the most effective way to do it, because when you create it on CN Maestro, that policy will get pushed down to every switch in your network. When you're using COI, I mean, you're only talking to one switch with COI, so it only creates the policy on that switch. So anyway, if you're logged into your Cambium account on CN Maestro, right, you can log into it from your desk. You could log into it from where you're sitting right now. And from your CN Maestro interface, you can create a PBA policy. That policy, it's just an example of configuration. So it pushes that configuration down to the switches, and voila, PBA is now installed on those switches. So yeah, everything can be done remotely.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Last question here for you. Because CN Maestro is free, will it be supported by your tech support for advanced troubleshooting?
Yes.
Excellent. John, thank you so much for answering all of those questions for us today. And also thank you to everyone attending today's webinar. And if anyone has any further questions, please feel free to contact your sales rep or email us at sales@microcomtech.com. And if you wish to view any of the products mentioned or shown today, please visit us at www.microcom.us. And remember, this webinar presentation has been recorded and will be uploaded to our Microcom YouTube channel so you can view it again. John, appreciate your time and all of your very valuable, interesting information in today's webinar. Until next time, thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate your time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.